A weary janitor, barely noticed in the halls of a giant corporation, drops his old wallet on the floor. Inside it, a faded Purple Heart, proof of a sacrifice no one knew. When the powerful CEO discovers it, her cold world shatters in an instant. For the first time, she sees him not as a janitor, but as a hero, and a single father fighting for his daughter's future. But just as compassion sparks a bond between them, a dark secret from his past is exposed, and the very people who should honor him turn against him. Now everything he's built, his job, his dignity, his daughter's future, hangs in the balance. Will courage and compassion be enough to save him this time? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun painted long shadows across the polished marble floor of Carter Enterprises' lobby. Jack Turner's weathered hands guided the mop in slow, methodical strokes, each movement precise and purposeful, just like the military had taught him decades ago. The massive glass windows stretched from floor to ceiling, allowing the dawn light to stream in and catch the silver streaks in his short-cropped hair. At 68, his body wasn't as spry as it used to be. His knee ached from an old war wound, and his back protested when he bent to wring out the mop. But Jack never complained. Work was work, and he was grateful for it. The lobby was empty at this hour, just the way he liked it. No bustling executives in designer suits, no clicking heels on marble floors, no sideways glances that looked through him rather than at him. In these quiet moments, Jack could work in peace, finding satisfaction in transforming the smudged floors into gleaming surfaces. His hand brushed against his back pocket, feeling the familiar outline of his worn leather wallet. Inside, tucked behind a faded photo of his daughter Emily, lay his Purple Heart. The metal had lost some of its luster over the years, but its significance had never dimmed. "Morning, Mr. Turner!" The cheerful voice of Maria, the security guard, echoed across the lobby. Jack straightened up, offering a small smile. "Morning, Maria. How's that boy of yours doing in college?" "Getting straight A's." Her face beamed with pride. "Thanks for asking. You always remember." That's because Jack knew what it meant to want the best for your child. Emily was his whole world, the reason he pushed through every long day, every aching muscle. At 17, she was smart as a whip and dreamed of college, dreams that kept Jack working despite his age. As he moved his cleaning cart toward the executive floor, memories of Vietnam flickered through his mind. The humid air, the constant tension, the brotherhood forged in fear and courage. The Purple Heart had come at a heavy price. 3 months in a military hospital and a leg that never quite healed right. But he'd survived when others hadn't, and he carried their memory with quiet reverence. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor, where wealth whispered from every surface. Rich mahogany panels lined the walls, and plush carpeting muffled his steps. Here, among the offices of Carter Enterprises' elite, Jack felt most invisible. Yet he took pride in his work, ensuring every trash bin was emptied, every surface dusted, every window spotless. Walking past the photographs of previous CEOs, Jack paused at the newest addition, Evelyn Carter. Unlike the stern-faced men before her, Mrs. Carter's portrait showed a hint of warmth in her eyes, despite her professional pose. He'd seen her a few times, always from a distance, always busy with important meetings and phone calls. The conference room door stood ajar, morning light spilling onto the expensive oval table where million-dollar decisions were made daily. Jack pushed his cart inside, beginning his usual routine. Empty the wastebaskets, dust the blinds, clean the table. His thoughts drifted to Emily as he worked. She'd been up late last night, studying for her AP exams. The dedication in her eyes reminded him so much of her mother, gone now 7 years, but never forgotten. Jack had promised Sarah on her deathbed that he'd make sure Emily got her education, no matter what it took. The Purple Heart in his wallet seemed to grow heavier. He'd earned it saving 3 of his squad mates. But these days, his greatest act of courage was facing each dawn with hope, working to give Emily the future she deserved. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered if he was doing enough, if his humble janitor's salary could possibly pave the way for her dreams. Bending down to retrieve a crumpled paper under the conference table, Jack didn't notice his wallet sliding from his back pocket. It landed silently on the plush carpet, falling open just enough to reveal the edge of the Purple Heart, its purple ribbon a stark contrast against the dark floor. The sharp click of heels echoed through the empty hallway as Evelyn Carter approached the glass-walled conference room. Her tailored navy suit and perfectly styled dark hair reflected her usual polished appearance, but the shadows under her eyes betrayed another restless night. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across the long mahogany table where she'd spend the next few hours discussing quarterly projections. At 42, she'd mastered the art of appearing completely put together, even when her heart felt anything but. As she placed her leather portfolio on the table, something caught her eye, a worn leather wallet lying partially hidden beneath one of the chairs. Evelyn paused, her hand hovering over her coffee cup. The janitorial staff usually caught any lost items during their morning round. "Hello?" she called out, but the room remained silent. With a slight sigh, she walked around the table and bent to retrieve the wallet. The leather was soft and cracked with age, its edges frayed from years of use. Unlike the sleek designer wallet she was accustomed to seeing, this one spoke of a life well lived, of someone who valued function over fashion. Her fingers traced the worn edges as she debated what to do. Protocol dictated sending it to building security, but something made her hesitate. Carefully, she opened it, hoping to find identification so she could return it personally. The first thing she noticed was a carefully folded piece of paper tucked into the billfold. A photo, she realized, as she gently pulled it out. It showed a younger man in military dress uniform, his arm around a small girl with pigtails. The edges were worn smooth, as if it had been handled countless times. Behind the photo, something metallic caught the morning light. Evelyn's breath caught as she recognized the distinctive shape of a Purple Heart medal, its purple and gold surface slightly tarnished but still dignified. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it, memories of her late husband's own military service washing over her unexpectedly. She sank into the nearest chair, the weight of the medal in her palm feeling far heavier than its actual size. This wasn't just a lost wallet. It was someone's precious memories, their proof of sacrifice and service. A wave of emotion tightened her throat as she remembered Thomas, her late husband, and his own pride in serving. He'd never made it home to receive any medals. The car accident had taken him 5 years ago, long before his time. The sound of voices in the hallway snapped Evelyn back to the present. She quickly but carefully returned the photo and medal to their proper places in the wallet, though her mind kept returning to that faded image of the soldier and his daughter. Rising from her chair, she smoothed her skirt and pressed the intercom button on the conference room phone. "Sandra, could you come in here for a moment?" Her assistant appeared promptly, tablet in hand. "Yes, Miss Carter? I found this wallet under one of the chairs," Evelyn said, holding up the worn leather. "Could you find out which member of the janitorial staff was responsible for cleaning this room this morning? I'd like to return it personally." Sandra's eyebrows rose slightly. It wasn't often the CEO concerned herself with lost and found items. "Of course, Miss Carter. I'll check the schedule right away." "Thank you," Evelyn said, her fingers still resting on the wallet. "Please, have them come up as soon as possible." As Sandra left, Evelyn walked to the window, the wallet still in her hands. Below, the city was coming to life, streams of people hurrying into office buildings with coffee cups and briefcases. Somewhere among them was a veteran who had sacrificed enough to earn a Purple Heart, only to end up cleaning corporate conference rooms. The thought stirred something deep within her, a mix of compassion and curiosity that she hadn't felt in a long time. In the reflection of the glass, she saw the hard-earned mask of corporate efficiency soften slightly. Perhaps Thomas's death had made her too focused on business, too removed from the human side of things. She turned back to her seat, placing the wallet carefully beside her portfolio. The morning sun caught the worn leather, highlighting every scratch and scuff, each one a story she found herself wanting to know. Through the glass walls, she saw Sandra returning, tablet in hand. Evelyn straightened, smoothing her jacket out of habit, but her hand lingered near the wallet, drawn to its humble dignity and the unexpected connection it represented to a life so different from her own. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Carter? I've located the janitor who worked this floor this morning. Would you like me to have him come up now?" Evelyn pressed the button to respond, her voice steady despite the unusual flutter of anticipation in her chest. "Yes, please send him up right away." Jack Turner stood outside the CEO's office, his weathered hands fidgeting with the hem of his gray janitor's uniform. Through the glass walls, he could see Evelyn Carter, at her pristine desk, reviewing documents with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. His heart hammered against his ribs. In his 30 years of custodial work, he'd never been summoned to the executive floor. "Mrs. Carter will see you now," her assistant announced, gesturing toward the door. Jack stepped into the spacious office, his work boots feeling heavy and out of place on the plush carpet. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows made him squint slightly. He cleared his throat, standing at attention, an old habit from his military days that never quite left him. "Mr. Turner," Evelyn said, looking up from her desk. Her voice was gentler than he expected. "Please, have a seat." He lowered himself carefully into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, perching on the edge as if afraid to leave an impression on the expensive upholstery. "Ma'am, if this is about the conference room, I can assure you it'll be spotless." "Actually," she interrupted, reaching into her desk drawer, "it's about this." She carefully placed his worn leather wallet on the desk between them. Next to it, she laid the Purple Heart, its purple and gold surface catching the morning light. Jack's hand instinctively went to his back pocket, where his wallet should have been. His face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't realize I'd lost it." "There's nothing to apologize for," Evelyn said, studying his face with genuine interest. "I found it this morning in the conference room." She picked up the medal, holding it with unexpected reverence. "Would you tell me about this?" Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He rarely spoke about his service, and never at work. "It's nothing special, ma'am. Just did what any soldier would do." "I disagree," Evelyn said quietly. "The Purple Heart isn't awarded for nothing special." She leaned forward slightly, her professional facade softening. "Please, I'd like to hear about it." Jack's weathered hands clasped together in his lap. His eyes focused on a point somewhere past the city skyline, visible through the windows. "It was in '68, near Khe Sanh," he began, his voice low and steady. "Our unit was pinned down by heavy fire. 2 of our guys were hit, lying out in the open." He paused, and Evelyn noticed how his right hand unconsciously moved to his left shoulder. "We couldn't leave them there. So I and another fellow, we crawled out to get them. Got the first one back okay." His voice grew quieter. "Taking fire the whole time. When we went for the second man, that's when I took the hit." "But you saved them both," Evelyn said softly, not as a question, but as a statement. Jack shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass both modesty and discomfort with praise. "Just did what needed doing. The other fellow, Thompson, he's the real hero. He dragged both of us back while still under fire." Evelyn watched as Jack finally met her gaze. In his eyes, she saw not just the memory of that day, but decades of quiet dignity, the same dignity with which he mopped floors and emptied trash bins, never seeking recognition or special treatment. "The medal stayed in a drawer for years," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "Started carrying it after my wife passed. Reminds me that if I could get through that day, I can get through anything." A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Helps when things get rough, raising Emily on my own." Something in his words struck a chord in Evelyn. She thought of her own losses, the facade of strength she maintained in the corporate world. Without realizing it, she had risen from her chair and walked to the window, her back straight but her shoulders softening from their usual rigid pose. When she turned back to face Jack, her expression had changed. The calculating CEO had been replaced by something warmer, more human. "Mr. Turner," she said, then corrected herself. "Jack, would you join me for coffee? I'd like to hear more about your daughter." Jack blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard by the invitation. "Ma'am?" "Please," she said, surprising herself with the genuine warmth in her voice. "I know a quiet place just around the corner. Sometimes it's nice to step away from all this." She gestured at the imposing office around them. Jack looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Seeing past the expensive suit and CEO title to the person underneath, he saw something familiar in her eyes, a kind of lonely understanding that made his usual reticence fade. "Yes, ma'am," he said, standing up. "I'd like that." Evelyn picked up his wallet and the Purple Heart, handling them with careful respect as she returned them to him. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and in that moment, something shifted in the air between them, a bridge forming between their 2 very different worlds. "Shall we?" she asked, reaching for her coat. The morning sun caught the subtle shimmer of her dark hair as she moved, and for the first time that day, her smile reached her eyes. The company cafe buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd. But today something was different. Conversations hushed, and heads turned as Evelyn Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises, walked in with Jack Turner, the building's janitor, at her side. Jack felt every stare as they made their way to a corner table. His uniform stood out starkly against the sea of pressed suits and designer dresses. He watched as Evelyn gracefully took her seat, seemingly oblivious to the ripple of whispers spreading through the cafe. "Please, sit down, Mr. Turner," Evelyn said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from her. "And I insist you call me Evelyn." "Yes, ma'am. I mean, Evelyn," Jack replied, carefully settling into the chair. His calloused hands rested awkwardly on the polished tabletop. A young barista hurried over, her eyes darting between them. "Mrs. Carter, your usual latte?" "Yes, thank you, Sarah." Evelyn turned to Jack. "And for you, just black coffee, please," Jack said quietly. More whispers floated across the cafe. Two executives at a nearby table weren't even trying to hide their stares. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. "Pay them no mind," Evelyn said, noticing his discomfort. She pulled out his Purple Heart medal and placed it gently on the table between them. "Tell me more about your service, Jack. How long were you in Vietnam?" Jack's weathered fingers traced the edge of the medal. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Not that I was counting." A slight smile crossed his face, but his eyes held shadows of memories he usually kept locked away. "That's a long time to be away from home," Evelyn observed. "It was." Jack paused as Sarah returned with her drinks. "Thank you," he said to the barista, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "Back then, I was just a kid, really. 19 when I shipped out. Thought I knew everything." He shook his head. "Turned out I didn't know anything at all." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her own coffee untouched. "The medal, how did it happen?" Jack took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Our unit was ambushed. I heard one of our newer guys crying out, 'Bobby Martinez, just 18. Couldn't leave him there." His voice grew quieter. "Got him out, but caught some shrapnel in the process. Nothing compared to what some others went through." "You're too modest, Jack. That was incredibly brave." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what anyone would have done." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "Not everyone would have." She studied him for a moment. "Do you have family, Jack?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His hands tightened around his coffee mug. "My daughter Emily, she's 16. Pride softened his features as he mentioned her name. "Just the two of you?" Evelyn asked gently. Jack's eyes dropped to his coffee. "Sarah, my wife, she passed away 8 years ago. Cancer." He swallowed hard. "Emily was only 8 at the time." The cafe's background chatter seemed to fade away as Evelyn absorbed this information. Her own grief, usually kept carefully contained, stirred in her chest. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I lost my husband David 2 years ago. Car accident." Her voice wavered slightly. Some days it still feels like yesterday. Jack looked up, meeting her eyes. For the first time, he saw past her polished exterior to the pain she carried. "It doesn't really get easier, does it? Just different." "Different," Evelyn agreed softly. "How did Emily handle it?" "She grew up too fast," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. "Started taking care of me more than I was taking care of her. Making sure I ate, doing extra chores. No kid should have to do that." He shook his head. "But she's amazing. Straight A's. Volunteers at the animal shelter. Wants to go to college. Be a social worker." "She sounds remarkable," Evelyn said. "You must be very proud, more than I can say." Jack's face clouded. "Just wish I could do more for her. This job, it keeps the lights on, but college," he trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Here was a man who had risked his life for his country, who had raised a daughter alone through grief, who worked with quiet dignity while others looked right through him, and now he worried about giving his daughter the future she deserved. A comfortable silence fell between them, each lost in their own thoughts of loss and love and the weight of carrying on. The afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, casting long shadows across their table, while around them the whispers continued, but neither of them noticed anymore. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the library parking lot as Jack pulled up in his well-worn pickup truck. Through the large windows, he could see Emily shelving books in the young adult section, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She had her mother's gentle way of handling things, treating each book like it was precious. Jack checked his watch. 5:45 p.m., right on time. Emily spotted him through the window and gave a little wave, quickly finishing up her task. A few minutes later, she emerged from the library's double doors, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad." Emily climbed into the passenger seat, bringing with her the familiar smell of old books and library dust. "You're never going to believe what Mrs. Henderson let me do today. She actually trusted me with cataloging the new arrivals." Jack smiled, pulling out of the parking lot. "That's great, sweetie. Sounds like you're becoming their star employee." "Well, technically I'm just a volunteer," Emily corrected him, then noticed something different in his expression. "Wait a minute, you look weird. Did something happen at work?" Jack drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, not quite sure where to begin. "You could say that. Remember how I lost my wallet this morning?" "Yeah, you were practically turning the house upside down looking for it. Well, I found out where it went. Or rather, someone else found it." He paused at a red light. The CEO of Carter Enterprises, Miss Carter herself, picked it up in the conference room. Emily's eyes widened. "The CEO? Like your big boss? The one everyone's scared of?" "That's the one. But here's the thing. She's not exactly what people say she is." Jack proceeded to tell Emily about his unexpected morning, about Evelyn finding his Purple Heart and their conversation in her office. "And then," he continued, "she invited me to have coffee with her in the company cafe." Emily's mouth dropped open. "No way. You had coffee with the CEO?" She started giggling. "Look at you, Dad, moving up in the world. Next thing you know, you'll be wearing one of those fancy suits and carrying a briefcase." "Very funny," Jack said, but he couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. "It wasn't like that. We just talked." "About what?" Emily leaned forward, genuinely curious now. Jack's expression softened. "Different things. The war a bit. She lost her husband recently, car accident. We talked about what it's like, raising someone on your own." He glanced at his daughter. "I told her about you." "You did?" Emily's teasing tone had disappeared. "What did you say?" "Just that I'm proud of you. That you're smart and kind, just like your mom was." Emily grew quiet, looking out the window. Jack knew that, look, she was thinking about Sarah, his late wife. These moments always carried a mixture of sadness and warmth. They pulled into their driveway, the gravel crunching under the truck's tires. Their house wasn't much. A small ranch-style home with faded blue paint that needed touching up. But it was theirs. Jack had managed to keep up with the mortgage payments, even if it meant taking extra shifts sometimes. Inside, Emily headed straight for the kitchen to start dinner. It was her night to cook. Jack followed, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. He pulled out the Purple Heart, its purple and gold surface catching the light from the kitchen window, and placed it on the counter. Emily paused in the middle of pulling out a pot for spaghetti. She approached the counter slowly, her fingers hovering over the metal before gently touching its surface. "You never really talk about this," she said softly. "About what happened over there." Jack leaned against the counter, watching his daughter trace the outline of the heart-shaped metal. "No, I suppose I don't." "The CEO, Miss Carter, she asked about it?" "She did." Jack nodded. "It was strange, actually. Nobody at work has ever asked before. Most people don't even know I served." Emily picked up the metal carefully, holding it in her palm. "Could you tell me about how you got it?" Her voice was quiet, respectful. "I mean, if you want to." Jack looked at his daughter, 16 years old now. But in moments like these, he could still see the little girl who used to climb into his lap for bedtime stories. She'd never pushed him about Vietnam before, seeming to understand instinctively that some memories were hard to share. But now, after his conversation with Evelyn had stirred up the past, maybe it was time. "It was during my second tour," he began, his voice taking on a distant quality. "We were running patrol near a small village. There was this young private in our unit, Bobby Chen. Couldn't have been more than 19. Emily stood perfectly still, the Purple Heart cradled in her hands, listening as her father spoke about a day that had changed his life forever. The kitchen timer beeped, reminding them about dinner, but neither moved. The metal gleamed in the fading daylight, a bridge between past and present, between father and daughter, between the man Jack had been and the man he had become. Evelyn kicked off her heels as soon as she entered her penthouse apartment, letting them clatter against the marble floor. The city lights twinkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, but she barely noticed the view she usually loved. Her mind was still caught up in her conversation with Jack from earlier that day. She changed into comfortable clothes, soft gray pants and an oversized sweater, and made herself a cup of chamomile tea. Instead of heading to her home office to tackle the usual evening workload, she settled onto her white leather couch with her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing, "Vietnam War Purple Heart Stories." The screen filled with images and articles. Some showed young soldiers receiving their medals. Others detailed harrowing tales of sacrifice. Evelyn's throat tightened as she clicked through black and white photographs of wounded veterans. How many of them, like Jack, had come home to rebuild their lives in quiet dignity? She opened another tab and searched specifically about the battle Jack had mentioned. Her eyes widened as she read about the intense fighting, the impossible conditions. The casual way he described saving his fellow soldiers hadn't done justice to the reality she now saw laid out before her. "My God," she whispered, setting her tea down with trembling hands. The more she read, the more her chest ached. Stories of veterans struggling to readjust to civilian life. Tales of PTSD, of families trying to understand, of proud soldiers reduced to taking whatever jobs they could find. Jack's story wasn't unique, but that made it even more heartbreaking. Evelyn pulled up the company's employee database, something she rarely did personally. There was Jack's file, basic information, employment history, emergency contacts. His daughter Emily was listed there, along with their modest address in a working-class neighborhood across town. His performance reviews were exemplary, though simple, thorough, reliable, punctual. Such small words for such a remarkable man. She thought about her own father, who'd been a business titan. He'd taught her to judge people by their achievements, their ambitions. What would he think of her spending an afternoon with a janitor? But then she remembered Jack's eyes when he spoke about his daughter, that same fierce love and pride her father had shown her. Standing up, Evelyn walked to her bedroom and opened her jewelry box. Inside lay her husband Thomas's wedding ring on a thin gold chain. She held it in her palm, remembering how he'd always stopped to chat with everyone in the office, from executives to maintenance staff. "Everyone has a story," he used to say. "Everyone matters." Back in the living room, she pulled up more articles about veterans' support programs. Her screen filled with statistics about unemployment rates, housing difficulties, and medical challenges. How many other veterans worked in her company? How many struggled silently like Jack? The clock on her wall chimed 10 times. Evelyn realized she'd been researching for hours, her tea long cold beside her. She opened her email and began composing a message to her assistant about setting up a meeting with Jack. No, this felt too impersonal. She pulled out her personalized stationery instead. The cream-colored paper felt substantial under her fingers as she began to write. "Dear Jack, I would very much appreciate meeting with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in my office, if your schedule permits. There are some matters I'd like to discuss. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter." She sealed the envelope and set it aside to be delivered through inter-office mail first thing in the morning. Her usual decisive business tone felt stiff and formal after everything she'd learned tonight. But she couldn't think of a better way to phrase it. Evelyn walked to her window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Far below, the city streets were still busy with late-night traffic. Somewhere out there, Jack was probably helping Emily with homework, or making sure she had everything ready for school tomorrow. Such a normal, precious moment, made possible by his extraordinary sacrifice years ago. She touched Thomas's ring, still hanging from its chain around her neck. "You were right," she whispered to his memory. "Everyone does have a story." The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. Not just because of Jack's story, but because of the genuine humanity she'd glimpsed behind his humble exterior. It reminded her of everything she'd once dreamed of changing in the corporate world, before grief and responsibility had hardened her. She wiped her eyes and returned to her desk, adding a small note to her calendar for tomorrow's meeting. Whatever came next, she knew this was about more than just one veteran janitor. It was about remembering who she was, and perhaps who she still could be. Evelyn slipped the note into an envelope marked for internal mail delivery, writing Jack's name and department carefully on the front. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. For tonight, she had research to finish and a lot to think about. The morning sun cast long shadows across Carter Enterprises' private garden, a hidden oasis nestled between towering office buildings. Dew still clung to the perfectly manicured grass, and the air held that special crispness that only early morning brings. Evelyn Carter walked beside Jack Turner along the winding stone path, their footsteps falling into a natural rhythm. Neither had spoken much since meeting at the garden entrance. Jack wore his usual gray janitor's uniform, pressed and clean despite its age. Evelyn had dressed more casually than usual in a simple black pantsuit, having arrived earlier than her normal time. "I come here sometimes," Evelyn said, breaking the comfortable silence, "when the decisions get too heavy." She gestured to a wooden bench beneath a flowering cherry tree. "Would you like to sit?" Jack nodded, maintaining a respectful distance as they settled on the bench. The morning breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers. "Thank you for meeting me again," Evelyn said, her voice softer than her usual boardroom tone. "I know it's early." "Early's normal for me, ma'am," Jack replied with a slight smile. "Been up since 4. Evelyn turned slightly to face him. "Please, call me Evelyn." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You know, when you told me about your daughter yesterday, about raising her alone," she took a deep breath. "It touched something in me." Jack's weathered hands rested quietly in his lap. "Must be hard, running a company this size by yourself." "It is." Evelyn's fingers twisted the gold wedding band she still wore. "After David died, my husband, everyone expected me to fall apart. Instead, I threw myself into work. The board thought I'd step down, take time to grieve. But I couldn't. This company was all I had left of him." Jack nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes keeping busy is the only way to keep going. "Exactly." Evelyn's voice wavered slightly. "David and I were coming back from a charity event. The roads were icy. The other driver," she shook her head. "It happened so fast." "I'm sorry," Jack said simply, but his words carried genuine weight. "How do you do it?" Evelyn asked. "Balance everything with Emily?" Jack's face softened at the mention of his daughter. "One day at a time, mostly. Emily makes it easier. She's got her mother's spirit. Strong, kind." He looked down at his hands. "After Sarah passed, cancer, Emily was only 8. There were some rough years, but you managed." "Had to. Emily needed me." Jack's voice grew thoughtful. "The hardest part wasn't the practical stuff, cooking, cleaning, helping with homework. It was the moment she needed her mother. First dance, first heartbreak, all those talks I wasn't prepared for." Evelyn found herself smiling. "You figured it out, though." "Made plenty of mistakes along the way," Jack admitted. "But Emily, she's patient with her old man. We learned together." He paused. "Sometimes I worry it's not enough, what I can provide on a janitor's salary. She's smart, wants to go to college. What does she want to study?" "Library science." Pride crept into Jack's voice. "She loves books, works part-time at the local library, says she wants to help people find stories that change their lives." Evelyn noticed how Jack's whole demeanor changed when speaking about Emily. The quiet, reserved man came alive with fatherly pride. "You know," Evelyn said, "I never had children. David and I always said we'd start a family someday. We were both so focused on building the company." She blinked back unexpected tears. "Now I wonder if we waited too long." Jack pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. The simple gesture, so genuine and unexpected, made Evelyn's throat tight. "Thank you," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "I haven't talked about this with anyone in a long time." "Sometimes it helps," Jack said gently, sharing the weight. They sat quietly for a moment, watching the morning light strengthen. A pair of sparrows hopped along the path, searching for breakfast. "Emily would like you," Jack said suddenly. "She's always telling me I need to talk to more people, not just stay in my routine." "Wise girl," Evelyn replied with a small laugh. "My assistant tells me the same thing. Says I spend too much time with spreadsheets and not enough with actual humans. They might be onto something." Jack agreed, a hint of humor in his voice. Evelyn checked her watch reluctantly. "The day's about to start. People will be arriving soon." Jack nodded, understanding the unspoken need to maintain professional appearances. They stood together, and Evelyn was surprised to realize how comfortable their conversation had become. "Thank you for sharing your morning with me," she said warmly. "Thank you for listening," Jack replied, his usual dignity now mixed with genuine warmth. "Not many CEOs would take the time. Not many janitors have Purple Hearts," Evelyn countered with a gentle smile. They walked back toward the building, their steps still in sync. At the garden entrance, they paused, both seeming reluctant to break the moment. "Have a good day, Evelyn," Jack said, testing out her first name carefully. "You too, Jack." They parted ways, Jack to his morning duties and Evelyn toward her office, each carrying a lighter heart than when they'd arrived. Evelyn sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, her leather portfolio open before her. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the faces of 12 board members in their crisp suits and stern expressions. "Let's begin with the quarterly budget review," said Marcus Wheeler, the chief financial officer. He clicked his presentation remote, and figures appeared on the large screen behind him. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the light as he adjusted them. "As you can see, our operating costs have increased by 12%. Evelyn watched the other board members shift in their high-backed chairs, their faces pinched with concern. She'd seen that look before, the one that meant cuts were coming. "We need to trim expenses," Marcus continued, his voice clipped and businesslike. "I've identified several areas where we can reduce overhead significantly." Another click showed a new slide filled with departmental breakdowns. Patricia Morrison, head of operations, leaned forward. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her red blazer a splash of color in the sea of dark suits. "What exactly are you proposing, Marcus?" "Outsourcing," he replied, straightening his tie. "Specifically, our entire maintenance and janitorial staff. We can contract with an external service provider at roughly 60% of our current costs." Evelyn's hand tightened around her pen. The image of Jack's Purple Heart flashed in her mind, followed by his quiet dignity as he'd told her about Emily. "That's nearly 40 people," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. 43, Marcus corrected, not looking up from his papers. "All non-essential personnel. The savings would be substantial, nearly $2 million annually." The board members nodded in approval, making notes on their tablets. Thomas Bennett, the eldest board member, smiled. "Excellent analysis, Marcus. When can we implement?" "We could begin the transition within 30 days, Marcus replied. "I've already researched several cleaning service companies. They're eager to bid for the contract." Evelyn watched as the board members exchanged satisfied looks. To them, this was just another business decision, numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't see the faces, the lives, the families that would be affected. "These are loyal employees," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the murmur of approval. "Many have been with us for years." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "They're janitors, Evelyn, easily replaceable. The contract workers will do the same job for less money. And without benefits," Marcus added, as if this were a selling point. "No health care costs, no retirement plans to manage. It's a significant saving across the board." The discussion continued around her, but Evelyn barely heard it. She thought of Jack's story about Vietnam, about the medal he'd earned saving his fellow soldiers. Now, after years of faithful service to the company, he would be discarded like outdated equipment. "We'll need to draft termination notices," Thomas was saying. "Human resources can handle the paperwork. And security protocols," Patricia added. "We'll need to coordinate badge deactivation and equipment return." Evelyn's stomach churned as she watched them plan the dismantling of 43 lives with the same detachment they might use to discuss changing coffee suppliers. She thought of Jack's daughter Emily, working part-time at the library, dreaming of college. How many other families would be devastated by this decision? "I think we should explore other options," Evelyn said, but Marcus was already moving on to the next slide. "Now, about the marketing budget for next quarter." The meeting dragged on for another hour, but Evelyn barely participated. Her mind kept returning to that morning in the garden, to Jack's quiet strength and genuine warmth. How could she face him knowing his job was about to be eliminated? As the board members filed out, chatting about dinner plans and weekend golf games, Evelyn remained seated. She stared at the empty chairs, at the coffee cups left behind for the evening cleaning staff, the same staff that would soon be gone. Marcus paused at the door. "It's just business, Evelyn. You can't let sentiment cloud your judgment." After he left, Evelyn stood and walked to the window. Below, she could see Jack pushing his cleaning cart down the corridor, nodding politely to executives who barely acknowledged his existence. He stopped to help a young intern who had dropped her files, taking time from his duties to assist someone else, just as he had in Vietnam, just as he did every day. The board's decision felt like a physical weight on her shoulders. As CEO, she had considerable power, but the board could overrule her on major financial decisions. Fighting them would mean risking her own position, challenging the very people who had helped build the company to its current success. But as she watched Jack disappear around the corner, Evelyn knew she couldn't simply stand by. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet or corporate efficiency. This was about people, good people like Jack Turner, who deserved better than to be discarded for the sake of profit margins. Her reflection stared back at her from the window, and for a moment she saw herself as others might, the polished, successful CEO who had everything under control. But beneath that surface, her heart ached with the weight of the decision before her. She couldn't let this happen. Not to Jack, not to any of them. The question was, how could she stop it? The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of Carter Enterprises, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Jack pushed his cleaning cart past clusters of employees gathering around their morning coffee, his mop moving in steady, practiced strokes. "Can you believe it?" a young woman in a pencil skirt whispered to her colleague. "The CEO having coffee with the janitor? It's like something out of a movie." "I heard she even walked with him in the garden," another added, stirring creamer into her cup. "Maybe she's trying to show she cares about all levels of employees." Jack kept his head down, focusing on the rhythmic motion of his work. After 30 years of cleaning floors, he'd learned to become almost invisible. But today, he felt eyes following him everywhere. Near the water cooler, a group of junior executives huddled together, their voices carrying just enough for Jack to hear. "It's probably just for show," a man in an expensive suit scoffed. "Good PR, you know. CEO connects with common worker. Makes for great headlines." His companion chuckled. "Well, she is a widow. Maybe she's just lonely." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. The comment stung, not for himself, but for Evelyn. He'd seen genuine pain in her eyes when she spoke about her husband. A few feet away, Sarah from Human Resources defended the CEO. "I think it's wonderful," she said firmly. "Mrs. Carter's showing real leadership by getting to know everyone, even the cleaning staff." "Even the cleaning staff?" her colleague repeated with raised eyebrows. "Like we're some kind of charity case?" Jack moved on to the next section of floor, but the conversations followed him throughout the morning. In the break room, he heard accounting clerks debating whether it was appropriate for someone of Evelyn's status to be so friendly with the help. By the elevators, sales representatives wondered if there was more to the story than met the eye. During his lunch break, Jack sat alone in the maintenance room, unwrapping his simple sandwich. The small space smelled of cleaning supplies and old mop water, but it was quiet here. No whispers, no judgmental glances. A knock on the door made him look up. Linda, one of the receptionists, poked her head in. "Jack, there's a spill on the 3rd floor when you're done with lunch." He nodded, but she lingered in the doorway. "You know," she said kindly, "I think it's nice that Mrs. Carter took time to talk with you. My father was in Vietnam, too." Jack managed a small smile. "She's a good person. Don't let the gossips bother you," Linda added. "They're just jealous they haven't had coffee with the boss." After she left, Jack pulled out his wallet and looked at the Purple Heart. If only they knew how uncomfortable all this attention made him feel. He was just doing his job, same as he had for decades. In the afternoon, he worked his way through the executive floor, aware of the subtle shift in atmosphere whenever he entered a room. Some people smiled too broadly, trying to show they approved of Evelyn's actions. Others barely acknowledged him, as if worried any interaction might be seen as following a trend. Near the end of his shift, Jack was organizing supplies in the main janitorial closet when he heard the click of heels approaching. The door opened, and Evelyn Carter stood there, concern etched on her face. "Jack, do you have a moment?" He straightened up, suddenly conscious of his worn uniform and the bleach stains on his hands. "Of course, Mrs. Carter." She stepped into the small space, closing the door partially. "I've heard some of the talk going around," she said directly. "I wanted to make sure you're okay." Jack gripped the handle of a mop, anchoring himself. "You shouldn't worry about me, ma'am. I'm used to people talking. That doesn't make it right. Evelyn's voice carried a note of frustration. You deserve their respect. I'm just a janitor, Mrs. Carter. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. Been one for most of my life, and I'm not ashamed of it. Someone's got to keep the place clean. You're not just anything, Evelyn insisted. You're a veteran, a father, a man who's lived through more than most of these people could imagine. Jack shook his head slightly. That's kind of you to say, but he gestured at his cart of cleaning supplies. This is who I am now, and I'm okay with that, really. Evelyn studied him for a moment, seeing the quiet dignity in his stance, the way he held himself with military straightness despite the humble surroundings. The others don't understand yet, she said softly. But they will. Jack's weathered hands fidgeted with a bottle of window cleaner. Mrs. Carter, you don't need to defend me. I appreciate your kindness, but I don't want to cause any trouble. You haven't caused anything, she replied firmly. And please, call me Evelyn. But Jack just nodded politely, his eyes fixed on the cleaning supplies. Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Carter? She recognized the gentle dismissal in his words, the way he was trying to restore the proper distance between CEO and janitor, not out of rudeness, but out of a deep-seated sense of propriety and perhaps protection, both for her reputation and his dignity. No, Jack, she said finally. Thank you. I'll let you get back to work. As she turned to leave, Jack spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I really am just a janitor, Mrs. Carter, and that's okay. The neon sign of Pete's Family Diner buzzed softly in the early evening darkness, casting a warm red glow across the cracked parking lot. Jack's old pickup truck pulled into a space near the entrance, its engine sputtering before falling silent. He glanced at Emily in the passenger seat, noticing how she fidgeted with the hem of her carefully chosen sweater. You okay, sweetie? Jack asked, his weathered hands still resting on the steering wheel. Emily nodded, though her fingers continued their nervous dance. Just different. Having dinner with your boss. Mrs. Carter isn't like that, Jack said softly. You'll see. Through the large windows, they could see Evelyn already seated in a booth, dressed far more casually than her usual corporate attire, in a simple blue blouse and slacks. She spotted them and waved, her smile genuine and warm. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and grilled onions. The vinyl booth squeaked as Jack and Emily slid in across from Evelyn. A tired-looking waitress named Betty, her name tag slightly crooked, appeared almost immediately with menus. I hope you don't mind, Evelyn said, but I asked around the office about good local places. Everyone said Pete's has the best chocolate milkshakes in town. Emily's eyes flickered with interest, though she quickly looked down at her menu. Jack noticed the subtle shift in his daughter's posture, the tiny spark of excitement she tried to hide. The milkshakes are Emily's favorite, Jack shared, giving his daughter a gentle nudge, especially after her study sessions at the library. Really? Evelyn's face lit up. Well then, we absolutely must order some. I haven't had a proper milkshake in ages. She leaned in conspiratorially toward Emily. The board members would probably faint if they saw me with one. A small smile tugged at Emily's lips. Betty returned, pen poised over her pad. What can I get you folks? 3 chocolate milkshakes to start, Evelyn announced decisively. And I hear the meatloaf is spectacular. Best in town, Betty confirmed with a hint of pride. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. As they ordered, Jack couldn't help but notice how Evelyn treated Betty with the same respect she showed everyone at the office. There was no trace of the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms, just a kind woman genuinely interested in sharing a meal with them. So, Emily, Evelyn said once Betty had gone, your father tells me you're quite the scholar. What subjects interest you most? Emily glanced at her father before answering. I really like social studies. And English when we're reading something interesting. They're doing To Kill a Mockingbird now, Jack added proudly. Emily's paper on Scout got an A+. A slight blush colored Emily's cheeks, but Evelyn's enthusiastic response drew her out further. That's one of my favorite books. What did you think about Scout's relationship with Atticus? The conversation flowed easier after that. Emily's initial reserve melted as she and Evelyn discussed books, school, and her part-time job at the library. Jack mostly listened, his heart warming at the sight of his daughter's growing animation. When the milkshakes arrived, tall glasses topped with whipped cream and maraschino cherries, Emily's eyes widened. Evelyn immediately pushed the cherry from hers onto Emily's glass. I never liked these much, she said with a wink. Consider it a bonus for that A-plus paper. For the first time that evening, Emily actually giggled. The meatloaf came steaming hot, accompanied by generous portions of creamy mashed potatoes. As they ate, Evelyn shared stories about her own high school days, including a disastrous attempt at the debate team that had Emily laughing outright. I was so nervous, I knocked over the podium, Evelyn admitted, gesturing with her fork. Papers went everywhere. But you know what? I got back up and finished my argument. Even won the debate. Really? Emily asked, forgetting to be shy. Really. Sometimes our biggest moments come right after our biggest embarrassments. Evelyn's eyes held a gentle wisdom. The trick is not letting the fear of failure stop you from trying. Jack watched as his daughter absorbed these words, seeing something shift in her expression. It was the same look she got when solving a particularly challenging math problem. Thoughtful, considering. Between bites of meatloaf and sips of milkshake, Emily gradually opened up about her dreams of maybe becoming a social worker someday. I want to help people, she admitted softly. Make things better for them. That's a wonderful goal, Evelyn said warmly. The world needs more people who want to make a difference. As they finished their meal, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Favorite movies, funny stories about Jack's cleaning adventures, Emily's collection of bookmarks from the library. The tension that had marked the beginning of the evening had completely disappeared. Betty brought the check, which Evelyn smoothly picked up despite Jack's protests. Please, she said firmly. This was my invitation. Besides, the company I enjoyed was worth far more than the price of dinner. Outside, the night had settled in fully, the diner's neon sign now a beacon in the darkness. As they walked to their respective cars, Emily surprised everyone by giving Evelyn a quick, spontaneous hug. Thank you for dinner, she said, then darted toward Jack's truck, suddenly shy again. Jack stood for a moment, watching his daughter through the truck's window. She was already pulling out her phone, probably to text her friend about the evening. The smile on her face was one he hadn't seen in weeks, open, unguarded, full of possibility. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main conference room at Carter Enterprises, casting long shadows across the polished oak table. 50 employees sat in cushioned chairs, their attention fixed on Evelyn Carter as she stood at the front of the room. Before we begin our usual Monday meeting, Evelyn said, her voice clear and purposeful, I'd like to introduce someone special. She gestured toward the door where Jack Turner stood quietly, still in his gray janitor's uniform. Many of you see Mr. Turner every day, but few know his story. Jack stepped forward, his work boots making soft sounds against the carpeted floor. His hands were clasped behind his back, an old military habit he'd never lost. The Purple Heart medal sat in his shirt pocket, where Evelyn had asked him to keep it for today's meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Carter, Jack said, his voice low but steady. He cleared his throat and looked out at the sea of faces. Some wore expressions of mild confusion, others polite interest. A few typing sounds from laptops quickly died down as he began to speak. I wasn't much older than some of you when I went to Vietnam, he started. Just 19. Thought I knew everything about the world. A gentle chuckle rippled through the room. Turned out I didn't know anything at all. Jack's weathered hands moved to his pocket, touching the Purple Heart through the fabric. This medal, well, it's not really mine. It belongs to the men I served with, especially those who didn't come home. The room grew completely still. Even the usual hum of the building's air conditioning seemed to fade away. We were on patrol near the Mekong Delta, Jack continued, his eyes growing distant. Hot day. Humid. The kind of weather that makes your uniform stick to your skin. He paused, swallowing hard. We had a new kid with us, Bobby Martinez, 18 years old. Still had acne on his face. Several younger employees leaned forward in their chairs. An executive who'd been checking his phone slowly set it down. The shooting started without warning. We dove for cover, but Bobby... Jack's voice wavered slightly. Bobby froze, just stood there, like a statue. I didn't think. Just moved. Grabbed him and threw him behind a fallen tree. That's when I felt it. Like being hit with a hammer. Right here. He touched his left shoulder. Evelyn watched as her employees' faces changed. The woman from accounting who always complained about cleaning staff wiped at her eyes. The young marketing director who rushed past Jack every morning without a glance now sat transfixed. "But that's not the important part," Jack said, his voice growing stronger. "The important part was what happened after. How my unit refused to leave me behind. How they carried me through jungle for 6 hours to reach help. How Bobby visited me every day in the field hospital, bringing me extra portions of whatever food he could find." He reached into his pocket and finally pulled out the Purple Heart. The metal caught the sunlight, its purple and gold surface gleaming. "This isn't about bravery. It's about brotherhood. About knowing that every person, no matter their rank, their job, their background, has value, has dignity." A woman in the front row was openly crying now. Next to her, a senior vice president who'd supported the janitorial staff cuts sat very still, his face troubled. "When I came home," Jack continued, "I struggled. Many of us did. But I learned something important. Every day is a gift. Every person you meet might be fighting battles you know nothing about. The least we can do is treat each other with kindness." He glanced at Evelyn, who nodded encouragingly. "These days I'm just a janitor. But I'm proud of what I do. Because at the end of the day, it's not about medals or recognition. It's about doing your best to serve others, just like my brothers served me." Jack fell silent, his hands carefully returning the Purple Heart to his pocket. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if a spell had broken, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, their faces showing genuine respect and emotion. As the applause continued, Evelyn stepped forward to stand beside Jack. She saw the surprise in his eyes at the response, the way he ducked his head slightly in modesty. But she also saw something else. A flash of pride, quickly hidden, but real nonetheless. The applause grew louder. The marketing director who'd ignored Jack for months was now wiping tears from his cheeks. The vice president who'd supported the cut stood clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Even the usually stoic head of legal department had red-rimmed eyes. Evelyn smiled, watching her employees respond with such genuine emotion. This was what she'd hoped for. Not just recognition for Jack, but a reminder to everyone that extraordinary people could be found in the most unexpected places. The applause finally began to die down, but the energy in the room had changed. People weren't looking at their phones or watches anymore. Instead, they were looking at Jack, really looking at him, perhaps for the first time. And in their faces, Evelyn saw exactly what she'd hoped to see: inspiration. The break room at Carter Enterprises hummed with activity during the Monday lunch hour. Jack Turner stood by the coffee machine, methodically wiping down the stainless steel surface with practiced care. His weathered hands moved in slow, deliberate circles. But his attention was elsewhere. "Mr. Turner?" A young analyst named David approached, clutching his lunch bag. "Do you have a minute?" Jack looked up, offering a gentle smile. "Just Jack is fine, son. And sure, I always have time." He tucked his cleaning cloth into his pocket. David shifted nervously. "I've been struggling with a decision about my career path." He settled into one of the nearby chairs, and Jack followed suit. "Everyone says I should take this promotion in marketing, but my heart's not in it. I really want to work with veteran support programs." Jack's eyes softened. He remembered similar crossroads in his own life. "Sometimes the right path isn't the obvious one," he said quietly. "After Vietnam, everyone expected me to be broken. Maybe I was for a while. But finding purpose in simple, honest work, that saved me." 2 other young employees drifted over, drawn by the conversation. Soon, a small group had gathered around Jack's table, their salads and sandwiches forgotten. "How did you know what to do?" asked Sarah from accounting, her eyes earnest. Jack thought for a moment, his fingers absently tracing the edge of the table. "You listen to your gut. But more importantly, you ask yourself who you're serving. Money, titles, they come and go. But making a difference in someone's life? That stays with you." Throughout the week, these informal gatherings became a regular occurrence. Tuesday found Jack sharing wisdom about perseverance with a frustrated IT specialist. Wednesday, he helped a young secretary find the courage to stand up to workplace bullying. By Thursday, employees began timing their breaks to coincide with Jack's cleaning schedule. They found him in different areas of the building, the lobby, the corridors, the cafe, but always with the same patient attention and quiet strength. In the mailroom, he showed a new hire how to properly sort packages, while discussing the importance of attention to detail. In the field, he explained, carefully demonstrating the sorting system. One small oversight could cost lives. Here, it might just be a delayed delivery, but every task deserves our best effort. During his floor mopping duties, he listened as a middle manager confided her fears about becoming a first-time mother. Being scared means you care, he told her, sharing stories about raising Emily. And caring is the first step to doing something well. Even the maintenance staff began to see Jack differently. They noticed how he treated every person with the same respect, whether they wore designer suits or work uniforms. His example sparked small changes. Maintenance workers began making eye contact with executives, offering friendly greetings. The executives, in turn, started learning names, asking about families. On Friday afternoon, Jack sat in the courtyard during his break, sharing his brown bag lunch with a group of junior analysts. They were discussing workplace stress when one of them asked about his combat experience. "War teaches you what really matters," Jack said softly, his sandwich forgotten in his hands. "When bullets are flying, you don't care about someone's background or status. You care about their character, their reliability, their heart." The young employees leaned in, hanging on every word. Jack continued, "That's something I try to remember here. Every person has value, has a story. Sometimes they just need someone to listen, to remind them of that." A gentle breeze rustled through the courtyard trees as Jack spoke about teamwork, about supporting each other through difficult times. His audience nodded, their usual competitive attitudes softening as they absorbed his words. Up in her office, Evelyn stood at her window, watching the scene below. She noticed how the young employees clustered around Jack, their body language relaxed and attentive. Even from this distance, she could see the impact he had on them. Her eyes followed Jack as he gathered his lunch remains and stood, patting one of the analysts on the shoulder with fatherly affection. The group dispersed reluctantly, but there was a new energy in their steps, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. Evelyn observed as Jack resumed his duties, pushing his cleaning cart down the pathway. Employees who passed him now stopped to chat, their faces lighting up with genuine warmth. Gone were the days when they rushed past without a glance. She watched him pause to help a marketing intern who had dropped her files, his movements unhurried despite his work schedule. The intern laughed at something he said, and Evelyn could see the tension leaving the young woman's shoulders. From her elevated vantage point, Evelyn saw what she had missed before, how Jack's presence had created ripples of change throughout the company. His simple acts of kindness, his willingness to listen, his quiet wisdom, they were transforming the corporate culture in ways no team-building exercise or motivational speaker ever had. Jack's cart disappeared around a corner, but his influence remained visible in the courtyard below. The employees who had shared lunch with him were now helping each other gather their things, holding doors, sharing smiles. It was as if his spirit of service had awakened something in them all. Evelyn pressed her hand against the cool glass of her window, her throat tight with emotion. The janitor she had once barely noticed had become the heart of her company, teaching lessons no business school could provide. The company auditorium buzzed with anticipation as employees filed in, filling row after row of seats. Colorful banners adorned the walls, each bearing the emblems of different military branches. A large "Honoring Our Veterans" sign hung prominently above the stage. Jack Turner stood at the back of the room, still in his janitor's uniform, confused about why he'd been asked to attend. He gripped his cleaning cart's handle, feeling out of place among the sea of business suits and formal attire. "Dad!" Emily's voice cut through the crowd. She hurried toward him, dressed in her best sweater and skirt. "What are you doing back here?" "Emily, shouldn't you be in school?" Jack's forehead wrinkled with concern. "Mrs. Carter called my school personally, said it was important I be here." Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Come on, we have reserved seats in the front." Jack hesitated. "Front? No, I should stay back here. I've got work to—" "Please follow me, Mr. Turner." A young assistant appeared, gesturing toward the front rows. "Mrs. Carter's instructions." Reluctantly, Jack let Emily lead him forward. As they walked down the aisle, he noticed other men and women in the audience, wearing military pins and patches. Some nodded at him in recognition. The lights dimmed, and Evelyn Carter stepped onto the stage. Her usual business attire was complemented by a red, white, and blue scarf. The room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice carried clearly through the speakers. "Today marks a special occasion at Carter Enterprises. We're here to honor the veterans among us, the men and women who served our country with distinction and now serve our company with the same dedication." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Evelyn continued. Emily squeezed his hand. "But today, I want to highlight one particular story. A story of extraordinary courage, humility, and dignity." Evelyn's eyes found Jack in the audience. "Jack Turner, would you please join me on stage?" The spotlight swung to illuminate Jack's seat. Emily gave him a gentle push, and he stood slowly, his legs feeling wooden. The walk to the stage seemed endless, each step echoing in the quiet auditorium. "Many of you know Jack as our dedicated maintenance staff member," Evelyn said as he reached her side. "What you might not know is that before he pushed a mop through these halls, he pushed through enemy lines in Vietnam to save his entire squad." Gasps rippled through the audience. Jack stared at his worn work boots, his cheeks flushing. 3 days ago, I asked Jack to share his military records with me," Evelyn continued, lifting a framed document. His Purple Heart citation reads, "For extraordinary valor in combat, risking his own life under heavy fire to drag 3 wounded comrades to safety." The audience sat in rapt attention as Evelyn detailed Jack's service history. With each word, Jack stood straighter, as if the weight of years of silence was lifting from his shoulders. "But Jack's heroism didn't end in Vietnam," Evelyn's voice softened. "Every day he shows up here with the same dedication, the same integrity he showed on the battlefield. He raises his daughter alone, works tirelessly, and touches lives without ever seeking recognition." She turned to face him directly, holding a beautiful wooden plaque. "Jack Turner, on behalf of Carter Enterprises, I present you with this recognition of your service, both to our country and to our company." Jack's hands trembled as he accepted the plaque. The polished wood bore a golden plate with his name, service details, and the words, "For valor, then, and now." I don't know what to say," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to say anything." Evelyn smiled. "But there's one more thing." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something small and familiar, Jack's Purple Heart medal, freshly polished and mounted on a new ribbon. "Your daughter helped us restore it," Evelyn explained softly. "May I?" Jack nodded, unable to speak. Evelyn stepped forward and carefully pinned the Purple Heart to his jacket lapel. The medal caught the stage lights, gleaming bright and proud against his work uniform. The first person to stand was a senior executive in the front row, a former Marine, judging by his bearing. Then, another veteran stood, and another. Like a wave, the entire auditorium rose to their feet. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. Jack looked out over the crowd, seeing not pity or condescension in their faces, but genuine respect. His eyes found Emily in the front row. She stood with tears streaming down her cheeks, clapping harder than anyone, her face glowing with pride. The Purple Heart on his chest felt warm, like a small flame of honor rekindled after decades of being hidden away. For the first time in years, Jack Turner stood tall, not as a janitor being overlooked, but as a soldier being remembered, a father being celebrated, a man being truly seen. The applause had finally died down in the auditorium, but Jack's heart was still racing. His Purple Heart medal caught the light as he stood near the refreshment table, watching employees chat and mingle. Some nodded respectfully in his direction, while others came over to shake his hand. It felt surreal. Just yesterday, most of these people had walked past him without a second glance. "Mr. Turner," a young executive assistant approached him. "Miss Carter would like to see you in her office." Jack's worn work boots squeaked against the polished floor as he made his way to the executive floor. His uniform felt out of place among the suits and ties, but today, somehow, it didn't matter as much. Evelyn was waiting by her office door, still wearing the navy blue blazer she'd worn for the ceremony. Her smile was warm as she gestured him inside. "Please, Jack, come in." The office was bathed in late afternoon sunlight. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out below them like a concrete garden. Jack sat carefully in one of the plush chairs facing Evelyn's desk, his hands folded in his lap. "That was quite something down there," he said quietly. "You didn't have to do all that." "Actually, I did." Evelyn moved to sit not behind her desk, but in the chair next to his. "Jack, what you've brought to this company in just these few weeks, it's remarkable. The way you connect with people, the wisdom you share, the example you set, it's exactly what we need here." Jack shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I just do my job. That's exactly it. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. You do so much more than just clean these halls. I've seen how the younger employees seek you out, how you listen to them, guide them. The stories you share about teamwork and perseverance from your military days, they resonate deeply. She paused, studying his face. I want to create a new position, Director of Veteran and Employee Support Initiatives. It would be a mentorship role, working with our staff to build a stronger company culture, using your life experience to guide others. Jack's mouth went dry. He stared at her, certain he'd misheard. I'm just a janitor, Miss Carter. No. Evelyn's voice was firm but gentle. You're a Purple Heart recipient, a father, a man who's faced adversity and shown incredible resilience, someone who understands the value of hard work and dignity. That's exactly who we need in this role. Jack's hands trembled slightly. He looked down at them, weathered from years of manual labor. I don't have a degree, no fancy training. You have something better, real-world experience and wisdom. The degree requirements would be waived. We'd provide any additional training you might need. She smiled. Think about Emily, Jack. This could change things for both of you. Emily. His daughter's face floated in his mind. Her quiet determination, her dreams of college, her part-time job at the library trying to help with expenses. His throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Evelyn stood up and walked to her desk, returning with a folder. Here's the formal proposal. Take it home. Review it with Emily. The salary and benefits are outlined inside. Jack took the folder with slightly shaking hands. The company logo gleamed on its surface, and he could feel the weight of the papers inside. Papers that might change his and Emily's lives forever. Thank you, he managed. This is overwhelming. You deserve this chance, Jack, more than you know. The drive home felt dreamlike. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a precious cargo. Jack's mind raced with possibilities he'd never dared to consider before. Emily could quit her part-time job and focus on school. College wouldn't seem like such an impossible dream. They could maybe even move to a better apartment. He found Emily in their small kitchen, heating up leftover pasta for dinner. The familiar smell of tomato sauce filled the air. She turned when he entered, her eyes bright with excitement. Dad, how was the ceremony? I wish I could have been there, but Miss Johnson couldn't let me leave the library early. Jack placed the folder on their worn kitchen table and pulled out a chair. Sit down, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Emily's face grew concerned as she sat. Is everything okay? More than okay. Jack's voice was thick with emotion. Ms. Carter, she offered me a new position, a real office job, Director of Veteran and Employee Support Initiatives. Emily's eyes widened. What? Dad, that's amazing. What would you do? Help other employees, share experiences, be a mentor. He opened the folder, showing her the papers inside. The salary, it's more than I've ever made, Emily. We could move somewhere better. You wouldn't have to work at the library anymore. College wouldn't be such a worry. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she scanned the documents. Then she was up, circling the table, throwing her arms around his neck. Dad, I'm so proud of you. So proud. Jack held his daughter tight, feeling her tears dampen his shirt collar. His own eyes grew misty as he thought of how far they'd come. All the tight months, the careful budgeting, the dreams they'd had to put on hold. Now, suddenly, a door had opened that he'd never even imagined existed. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes but still beaming. You deserve this, Dad. You've worked so hard for so long, and now everyone else can see what I've always known, how special you are. Jack touched the Purple Heart still pinned to his jacket. From war hero to janitor to mentor, life had taken him on paths he'd never expected. But holding his daughter, seeing her radiant smile, he knew that every step had led him exactly where he needed to be. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Carter Enterprises as Marcus Reynolds, Senior Vice President of Operations, sat in his dimly lit office. His computer screen glowed with police records from 40 years ago. The jealousy that had been gnawing at him since Jack's celebration finally had an outlet. For weeks, he'd watched Evelyn lavish attention on a mere janitor. His perfectly tailored suit felt tight around his neck, as he remembered how she'd practically glowed while presenting Jack with that ridiculous plaque. Reynolds had been passed over for promotion 3 times under Evelyn's leadership, and now she was creating special positions for maintenance staff? "This ends today," he muttered. Clicking through the archived documents, his secretary knocked softly. "Sir, I have those background check results you requested on Jack Turner." Reynolds waved her in, snatching the manila folder from her hands. His eyes widened as he scanned the contents. There it was, dated 1975, an arrest record from a bar fight. The details painted a vivid picture: property damage, resisting arrest, assault charges that were later dropped. The police report noted possible combat stress and Vietnam veteran status as mitigating factors. He leaned back in his leather chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. The psychological evaluation that followed the incident mentioned severe PTSD, depression, and anger management issues. Even though Jack had completed mandatory counseling and the charges were eventually dismissed, this was exactly what Reynolds needed. The morning board meeting was in 30 minutes. Perfect timing. Down in the lobby, Jack was quietly mopping the marble floors, unaware of the storm brewing above. Several employees greeted him warmly, a new experience he was still getting used to. One young analyst even stopped to thank him again for yesterday's advice about dealing with workplace stress. Up in her office, Evelyn was reviewing the paperwork for Jack's new position, Director of Veteran and Employee Support Initiatives. The title looked perfect on the crisp white paper. She'd spent hours crafting the role to maximize Jack's natural ability to connect with people while ensuring the board would see the business value. The boardroom gradually filled with executives in expensive suits and power dresses. Reynolds arrived last, clutching his folder with barely contained glee. Evelyn noticed his unusual enthusiasm, but attributed it to the quarterly numbers they'd be reviewing. "Before we begin," Reynolds announced smoothly, standing up, "I have a serious security concern to address." He began distributing copies of Jack's old arrest record and psychological evaluation. Evelyn's face paled as she looked down at the documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the details of that long-ago night. "As you can see," Reynolds continued, his voice dripping with false concern, "our celebrated janitor has a violent criminal record, post-traumatic stress disorder, uncontrolled rage incidents, property destruction, hardly the kind of person we want representing Carter Enterprises." The board members murmured amongst themselves, passing papers back and forth. Evelyn felt her throat tighten as she saw their expressions shift from surprise to disapproval. "This incident was 40 years ago," she managed to say, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Turner completed all required counseling and the charges were dismissed. The liability remains," Reynolds countered smoothly. "We're talking about someone with documented psychological issues, someone who could snap at any moment. And now our CEO wants to put him in charge of employee support?" He laughed coldly. "The potential lawsuit exposure alone should end this discussion." The board chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, while we appreciate your humanitarian interests, Mr. Reynolds raises valid concerns. This company cannot risk its reputation on someone with such a troubled history." Evelyn looked around the table, seeing heads nodding in agreement. The same people who'd applauded Jack yesterday were now ready to cast him aside based on one difficult night 4 decades ago. The injustice of it made her chest ache. "If I may," Reynolds added, clearly enjoying himself, "I've taken the liberty of preparing a standard termination package. Clean, quiet, minimal risk to the company." Evelyn's hands clenched under the table as she watched her carefully crafted plans for Jack's future crumble. The board members were already reaching for their pens, ready to sign off on Reynolds' recommendation. The morning sun continued to stream through the boardroom windows, but for Evelyn, all warmth had gone out of the day. She sat in stunned silence as Reynolds kept talking, twisting Jack's moment of weakness into a weapon, transforming his story of recovery into a tale of danger and liability. How could she tell Jack? How could she face Emily? The weight of their broken trust settled heavily on her shoulders as the board meeting continued around her, their voices distant and cold in her ears. The boardroom felt smaller than usual, its mahogany walls closing in as Jack stood before the assembled executives. His weathered hands, which had cleaned these very surfaces countless times, were steady at his sides. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the Purple Heart still pinned to his jacket lapel, a bitter reminder of another time he'd faced judgment. Marcus Reynolds sat with a satisfied smirk manila folder open before him. Black and white copies of ancient police reports were spread across the polished table. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, avoiding Jack's eyes. "Mr. Turner," Reynolds said, his voice dripping with false concern, "would you care to explain these incidents from 1975? Evelyn Carter rose from her seat, color high in her cheeks. "This is completely inappropriate." "Ma'am," Jack interrupted softly, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "Please, it's all right." He looked at each board member in turn, his dignity intact, despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "What those papers don't tell you is that I came home from Vietnam a broken man. Like many of my brothers, I struggled. One night, I had what they now call a flashback, broke some windows at a store, spent a night in jail." The silence in the room was deafening. Jack continued, his voice growing stronger. "I got help after that. Found purpose in raising my daughter. In honest work." He turned to Evelyn, his eyes full of gratitude. "Ma'am, you've shown me more kindness than I deserve, but I won't be the reason your judgment is questioned." "Jack, don't," Evelyn started, but he was already unpinning the Purple Heart. "I hereby resign my position, effective immediately." He placed the medal gently on the table. "This belongs here now. A reminder that sometimes the battles we fight aren't always visible." Evelyn moved around the table, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor. "I won't accept this resignation. The board needs to understand." "Please," Jack said quietly, holding up a hand. "My mind's made up. You can't fight every battle for me, Miss Carter. Some of us are meant to stay in the shadows." He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Just before exiting, he paused, looking back at Evelyn. "Thank you for seeing me as more than just a janitor, even if it was just for a little while." The elevator ride down felt endless. Jack's uniform, which had recently felt like a badge of honor under Evelyn's respect, now seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. In the basement locker room, he changed into his street clothes mechanically, folding his uniform one last time. The walk home took twice as long as usual. Jack's feet dragged along the cracked sidewalk as the afternoon sun beat down. The small houses in his neighborhood, with their worn paint and chain-link fences, had never looked quite so tired. Emily's bike was already chained to the front porch railing when he arrived. He could hear music drifting from her bedroom window. She must have gotten home early from her library job. The screen door creaked familiarly as he entered. "Dad?" Emily called out. "You're home early." Her footsteps bounded down the stairs, but she stopped short when she saw his face. "What happened?" Jack sank into his worn armchair, the one that had supported him through countless difficult nights. Emily perched on the arm, her hand finding his shoulder. "I had to resign today, sweetheart." His voice cracked slightly. "Someone dug up some old trouble from after the war, before you were born." Emily's grip tightened on his shoulder. "But Miss Carter, she was going to give you that new position. All those people at the ceremony, they believed in you." Jack covered her hand with his own. "Sometimes our past catches up with us. I couldn't let Ms. Carter risk her reputation defending me. The board would never have accepted it." "That's not fair." Emily's voice rose, thick with emotion. "You're the most honorable person I know. One mistake from 40 years ago shouldn't matter." "Life isn't always fair, Emmy." He used her childhood nickname, and she slid from the chair arm into his lap like she used to when she was small, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," he whispered into her hair. "I really thought this was our chance. A way to make sure you could go to college, have the opportunities your mother always wanted for you." His voice broke. "I've let you both down." Emily pulled back, her eyes fierce despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "Don't you dare say that. You haven't let anyone down." She gripped his shoulders. "You're Jack Turner. You survived Vietnam. You raised me alone after Mom died. You've never once complained about cleaning up after rich people who didn't even see you." "Emmy." "No, listen to me," she insisted. "You can't give up. We'll figure something out. We always do." She hugged him tightly again. "You're my hero, Dad. No piece of paper from the past will ever change that." Jack held his daughter close, his own tears finally falling. They sat together in the fading afternoon light, the old armchair creaking beneath them, while outside their small house, the world continued to turn. Moonlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evelyn's penthouse apartment, casting long shadows across the pristine hardwood floors. She lay in her king-sized bed, covers twisted around her restless form, staring at the ceiling as the digital clock on her nightstand blinked 2:17 a.m. Jack's final words in the boardroom echoed in her mind. "I appreciate everything you tried to do for me, Miss Carter, but I won't be the reason your reputation suffers." His quiet dignity, even in resignation, had cut deeper than any harsh words could have. Evelyn rolled onto her side, punching her pillow in frustration. The bed felt too large, too empty, just as it had since David's accident 3 years ago. Her late husband would have known exactly what to do in this situation. David had always led with his heart, choosing right over easy every single time. "I miss you so much," she whispered into the darkness. "I could use your wisdom right now." She pushed herself up, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. The hardwood was cool beneath her bare feet as she padded to the living room. Family photos lined the walls. Her wedding day, vacation snapshots, moments frozen in time. She paused before a particular frame. David in front of their first house, paint, splattered and grinning, giving a thumbs up to the camera. "What would you do?" she asked the photograph. "You always knew how to stand up for what's right." Settling onto her cream-colored couch, Evelyn clasped her hands together. Prayer hadn't come easily since David's death, but tonight the words flowed naturally. "Lord, give me guidance," she whispered. "Show me how to fix this." The city lights twinkled beyond her windows, a constellation of human activity even at this late hour. Somewhere out there, in a modest home, Jack was probably lying awake too. She thought of Emily, the bright young girl who had just started to believe in a better future. How many times had that child's hopes been dashed by an uncaring world? Memories of the past few weeks played through her mind like a movie. Jack's embarrassed smile when she'd first asked about his Purple Heart. Emily's laughter at the diner. The pride in Jack's eyes when sharing his experiences with younger employees. The board had seen only liability where she had witnessed transformation. Reynolds's smug face appeared in her mind, his manufactured concern as he'd spread those old police reports across the table. One night of confusion decades ago, when the war's shadows had grown too dark, that's all it had taken to undo weeks of progress. The same board members who'd nodded approvingly during the Veterans Appreciation Day had turned to ice the moment controversy threatened their precious bottom line. Evelyn stood, pacing the length of her living room. Her silk pajamas whispered against her skin as she moved, her thoughts racing faster than her feet. David's voice seemed to whisper in her memory. "The measure of leadership isn't how you handle easy decisions, Evie. It's what you do when doing right costs you something." She paused at her home office door, pushing it open. Moonlight spilled across her desk, where a framed article hung on the wall, her first cover story in Business Weekly. "Youngest female CEO in industry takes bold new direction." The headline felt hollow now. What good was breaking glass ceilings if you still played by the same cold rules as everyone else? Back in the living room, Evelyn curled up in her favorite armchair, the one David used to read in. She closed her eyes, remembering Jack's quiet strength as he spoke about his military service. No flashy tales of heroism, just simple truth about duty and sacrifice. How many corporate warriors in their expensive suits could claim such genuine nobility? The night crept forward. Evelyn dozed fitfully, waking to check her phone. 4:35 a.m. She wandered to her kitchen, not bothering with lights. The coffee maker hummed to life under her fingers, its familiar routine offering little comfort. Steam rose from her mug as she stood at her window, watching the sky lighten imperceptibly. The first hints of dawn touched the eastern horizon, painting the clouds in whispered shades of pink and gold. David had loved sunrises. "Each morning is a chance to start fresh," he'd say. "To do better than yesterday." Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cool glass. The weight of responsibility settled around her shoulders, not to her shareholders this time, but to her conscience, to the values David had lived by, to the quiet hero who mopped her floors and inspired her employees without even trying. The sun crept higher, painting her apartment in amber light. Evelyn straightened her shoulders, suddenly certain of her path. She couldn't stay silent. Not this time. Not when doing so meant betraying everything she claimed to believe in. She placed her empty mug in the sink and headed to her bedroom to prepare for the day ahead. The board meeting wasn't until 10, but she had preparation to do. This time, She wouldn't let fear of controversy silence what needed to be said. As dawn broke fully over the city, Evelyn stood before her mirror, adjusting her blazer with determined hands. David's photo caught her eye one last time, his smile seemingly brighter in the morning light. She nodded to his image, a silent promise in her heart. Today, she would make him proud. Today, she would make herself proud. The morning sun had barely risen when Evelyn stepped into the lobby of Carter Enterprises. Instead of the usual quiet bustle, she found clusters of employees gathered in small groups, their voices carrying an unusual urgency. As she walked past, snippets of conversation reached her ears. "Did you hear about Jack? It's not right what they did to him. He earned that Purple Heart defending our country." Sarah, a young marketing associate, approached Evelyn with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Carter, is it true about Mr. Turner? He helped me so much when my dad, also a veteran, was sick. He stayed late just to listen." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I understand your concerns, Sarah." More employees began gathering around her. Tom from accounting spoke up. "Mr. Turner helped my son with his college application essay. Spent his lunch break for a week straight, working with him." "Remember when he found Lisa's lost wedding ring in the trash?" Someone called out. "Searched through every bag until he found it." The lobby grew crowded as people shared their stories. Janet from HR stepped forward, clutching a folder to her chest. "Ms. Carter, we've started a petition. Over 300 signatures already, and it's not even 9 a.m. Evelyn accepted the folder with trembling hands. Each page contained neat rows of signatures, accompanied by personal notes about Jack's impact on their lives. "He deserves better than this," a voice said firmly. Walking to her office, Evelyn noticed something unprecedented. The usual divisions between departments had disappeared. Senior executives stood shoulder to shoulder with maintenance staff, united in their support for Jack. The mailroom supervisor was deep in conversation with the head of legal about organizing a formal protest. Her assistant Margaret hurried to keep up with her. "Your inbox is flooded, ma'am. Hundreds of emails from employees about Mr. Turner. Even clients are reaching out. They met him during their visits and were impressed by his integrity." Inside her office, Evelyn found her phone blinking with dozens of messages. The first was from Emily, Jack's daughter, her voice small but determined. "Ms. Carter, please don't let them do this to my dad. He's a good man. He's the best man I know." Evelyn sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. On her desk lay the morning's financial reports, but beside them sat Jack's service award from the Veterans Appreciation Day. The contrast couldn't have been starker, cold numbers versus human dignity. Through her office windows, she watched as more employees gathered in the courtyard. Someone had hung a banner, "Bring back Jack. Honor our veterans." The sight of suited executives standing alongside cafeteria workers, all united in purpose, made her pause. Her intercom buzzed. "Miss Carter, the board wants to move tomorrow's meeting to this afternoon. They're concerned about the situation." Evelyn smiled for the first time that morning. "Perfect timing, thank you, Margaret." She spent the next hours reviewing the petition, reading emails, and listening to voice messages. Each story painted a picture of a man whose impact went far beyond his job title. The janitor who remembered everyone's names, the veteran who counseled younger employees through difficult times, the father who inspired others with his quiet strength. Around noon, the head of PR burst into her office. "Ms. Carter, we have a situation. News outlets have picked up the story. They're calling it Corporate America versus Veterans' Rights. Social media is exploding." Evelyn walked to her window again. The crowd in the courtyard had grown. Someone was sharing Jack's story, his Purple Heart, his sacrifice, his decades of humble service. She saw tissues being passed around, heard applause echoing up to her office. "Ma'am," her assistant called softly from the doorway. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Evelyn nodded, gathering her materials. As she prepared to leave her office, she glanced at a photo on her desk, her late husband in his business suit, smiling broadly at their last charity gala. "What would you do, Robert?" she whispered. The answer came clearly. "Stand up for what's right." Walking to the boardroom, Evelyn passed more groups of employees. They fell silent as she passed, their eyes full of hope and expectation. She noticed some wearing makeshift purple ribbons, a silent show of solidarity with Jack. Outside the boardroom, she paused. Through the glass walls, she could see the board members already seated, their faces stern and worried. They had charts and graphs ready, probably showing the potential financial impact of this controversy. But Evelyn had different numbers to share: the petition signatures, the client support messages, the social media statistics, and most importantly, the countless stories of lives touched by one humble janitor who carried a Purple Heart in his wallet. The protest chants from the courtyard drifted up, faint but clear. "Justice for Jack! Justice for Jack!" Evelyn straightened her shoulders, touched the handle of her leather portfolio where she'd stored the petition, and reached for the boardroom door. The moment to take a stand had arrived. The mahogany-paneled boardroom felt colder than usual as Evelyn Carter stood at the head of the long table. 10 pairs of eyes stared back at her. The board of directors in their perfectly pressed suits, their faces a mix of irritation and indifference. "I've called this emergency meeting," Evelyn began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "to address the grave injustice done to one of our employees." Ms. Carter, Richard Morton, the eldest board member, cut in. "If this is about the janitor situation, his name is Jack Turner," Evelyn said firmly. "And he's not just a janitor. He's a Purple Heart recipient who spent years serving our country. His past military service, while admirable," Barbara Chen interjected, shuffling through some papers, "doesn't negate the liability issues his arrest record presents." Evelyn placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "That arrest was 30 years ago, tied to PTSD from his combat service. He got help. He recovered. He rebuilt his life. The company's reputation," another board member started. "Our reputation?" Evelyn's voice rose slightly. "Let's talk about reputation. This morning I walked through our lobby and heard dozens of employees expressing their dismay at how we treated Jack. They're not talking about his arrest. They're talking about how this company discarded a man who inspired them daily with his humility and wisdom." She pulled out her phone and played a video from the Veterans Appreciation Day. The room filled with the sound of applause as Jack stood on stage, his Purple Heart gleaming. "This is who Jack Turner is," she said softly. "This is the man you're so eager to cast aside." Morton shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Carter, while your personal attachment to this situation is understandable, we have to think about the bottom line." "The bottom line?" Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me tell you about the bottom line. Since Jack started sharing his experiences with our staff, employee morale has improved dramatically. People who never spoke to each other are now having lunch together. Young executives are seeking mentorship. Our company culture is transforming, and it's because of one janitor who showed more leadership qualities than many in this room." She saw several board members flinch at that, but she pressed on. "I'm proposing we not only reinstate Jack Turner but create a new position for him, Director of Veteran and Employee Support Initiatives. This role would formalize the positive impact he's already having on our workplace." "That's completely unprecedented," Barbara protested. "Creating a director-level position for a janitor? So is having a female CEO under 40. Evelyn countered. "Sometimes unprecedented moves are exactly what a company needs to evolve." Morton's face reddened. "This is emotional thinking, not business sense." "Is it?" Evelyn pulled out a folder and distributed copies of a report. "These are engagement surveys from departments where Jack has been informally mentoring staff. Notice the uptick in productivity, the decrease in sick days, the improved collaboration scores." The board members grudgingly examined the numbers. "But his arrest record," someone mumbled. "If you're so concerned about that," Evelyn said, her voice growing steel-edged, "then I suggest you look into the backgrounds of everyone in this room. I wonder how many of us have perfect pasts. The difference is, Jack turned his darkness into light. He transformed his trauma into wisdom that he now shares with others." She straightened to her full height, looking each board member in the eye. "I believe in Jack Turner's value to this company so completely that I'm willing to stake my position on it. Either we reinstate him with the new role I've proposed, or I submit my resignation. Effective immediately." A shocked silence fell over the room. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral. She watched as the board members exchanged glances, whispered among themselves. "You can't be serious," Morton finally said. "I've never been more serious in my life," Evelyn replied. "And I think you know what will happen if I leave. Those employees out there, the ones rallying around Jack, they'll follow. Our best talent will start looking elsewhere." The press will have a field day with how we treated a decorated veteran. Our stock will take a hit." She paused. "Is that the kind of bottom line you're interested in?" Barbara Chen leaned forward. "What exactly would this new position entail?" Evelyn pulled out another document. "I've outlined the role here. Jack would develop mentorship programs, coordinate veteran outreach, and work with HR on employee support initiatives. His military background and natural leadership abilities make him uniquely qualified. The salary requirements," Morton began, "are less than what we pay our junior executives," Evelyn finished. "And the potential return on investment, as I've shown in the reports, far exceeds the cost." The board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. Evelyn remained standing, her posture straight, her resolve unwavering. Minutes ticked by. Finally, Morton cleared his throat. "We'll need some assurances, a probationary period perhaps, and a clear understanding that any future incidents—" "Jack Turner has more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their entire being," Evelyn said quietly. "But yes, standard probationary terms are acceptable." More whispered consultation. Then Barbara Chen spoke. "We'll agree to a 6-month trial period for this new position. If the metrics support your projections, we'll make it permanent." "And his immediate reinstatement?" Evelyn pressed. Morton nodded grudgingly. "Effective immediately." Evelyn's shoulders relaxed slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Thank you for making the right decision. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork today." The board members gathered their things, filing out of the room with varying degrees of acceptance on their faces. Just before Morton left, he turned back. "You took quite a risk today, Miss Carter." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "No, Mr. Morton. The only risk would have been staying silent in the face of injustice. That's not the kind of leader I am, and that's not the kind of company we should be." She waited until the last board member had left before allowing herself a small smile. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gathered her documents, but her heart was at peace. She had fought for what was right, and for once, the system had bent toward justice instead of breaking someone's spirit. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk, leading to Jack Turner's modest home. Evelyn Carter sat in her car for a moment, taking in the well-maintained but aging single-story house with its small front yard. Despite its humble appearance, there was something warm and inviting about the potted flowers on the porch and the neatly trimmed grass. She smoothed her skirt and grabbed her leather portfolio, her heart beating faster as she approached the front door. This wasn't a business meeting. This was about changing lives. The doorbell chimed softly. Inside, she heard footsteps approaching. The door opened to reveal Jack, dressed in old jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, so different from his usual janitor's uniform. Surprise flickered across his weathered face. "Miss Carter?" he said, clearly caught off guard. "I wasn't expecting." "Please, call me Evelyn," she said warmly. "May I come in?" Jack hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside. "Of course, sorry about the mess. Wasn't exactly prepared for company." But the living room Evelyn entered was far from messy. Though the furniture was worn and dated, everything was meticulously clean. Family photos lined the walls, many showing a younger Jack in his military uniform, others of Emily growing up. A folded American flag sat in a triangle display case on the mantel. "Dad?" Emily's voice came from another room. "Who is it?" "It's Miss Carter," Jack called back, still looking puzzled. "From the company." Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening. She was wearing her library volunteer shirt, her long brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Please, sit down," Jack gestured to the couch. "Can I get you something to drink?" "No, thank you," Evelyn said, settling onto the comfortable if threadbare sofa. "I've come here today because we need to talk about something important." Jack lowered himself into his favorite armchair, his posture stiff with uncertainty. Emily perched on the armrest beside him, her hand resting protectively on her father's shoulder. "First," Evelyn began, "I want to apologize for how things happened at the company. You deserved better than that." "You don't owe me any apologies," Jack said quietly. "You were nothing but kind to me." "No, I do owe you an apology, because I should have fought harder, faster." Evelyn opened her portfolio and pulled out a folder. "But that's why I'm here now. The board has approved a new position, one that I've been pushing for since the day you first told me your story. Jack's brow furrowed. I don't understand. We're creating a new department, Evelyn explained, her voice growing animated. The Veteran and Employee Support Initiative. It's designed to help veterans transition into corporate work, provide mentorship to employees, and build a more compassionate company culture. She paused, looking directly at Jack. And I want you to be its first director. The room fell silent. Emily's hand tightened on her father's shoulder. Me? Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. But I'm just a... If you say just a janitor, I might have to scold you, Evelyn interrupted with a gentle smile. You're a Purple Heart recipient. A father who raised an amazing daughter single-handedly. A man who inspired our entire staff with your humility and wisdom. She leaned forward. Jack, in the few months you've been sharing your story, I've seen more positive change in our company culture than in all my years as CEO. She handed him the folder. Inside were details of the position, the salary, more than triple his janitor's wages, the benefits, the responsibilities. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he read. This is too much, he said hoarsely. I don't have the education for something like this. You have something better, Evelyn countered. You have real-life experience, wisdom, compassion. Those things can't be taught in any university. Emily had been reading over her father's shoulder, her eyes growing wider. Dad, she whispered. This would mean your college fund would be secure, Evelyn finished softly. And more importantly, you'd be helping others like yourself, veterans who deserve a chance, employees who need guidance. Jack stood up suddenly, walking to the mantel where his framed Purple Heart hung beside the folded flag. He stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Why me? He asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. Evelyn rose and walked over to him. Because you remind me of what real strength looks like. Not the kind that comes from power or money, but from dignity and resilience. Our company needs that kind of strength. Jack turned to face her, and Evelyn saw tears glistening in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Emily burst out, jumping up from her perch. Please, Dad, you deserve this. You've worked so hard, given up so much. Her voice caught. Evelyn watched as Jack looked from his daughter to the Purple Heart and back to the folder in his hands. She saw the moment the decision crystallized in his eyes. Yes, he said softly, then cleared his throat and said it again, stronger. Yes, I'll do it. Emily let out a small cry of joy and threw her arms around her father. Jack hugged her tight, tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. Then Emily surprised everyone by turning and hugging Evelyn fiercely. Thank you, Emily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for seeing who he really is. Jack Turner stood before the mirror in his bedroom, adjusting his new navy blue tie. His weathered hands, used to holding mops and brooms, now smoothed down the crisp white collar of his dress shirt. The outfit felt foreign, a far cry from his familiar janitor's uniform. But there was something right about it, too. Dad, you look amazing. Emily beamed from the doorway. She rushed over to help straighten his tie, her eyes bright with pride. Director Turner has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Jack chuckled softly, his cheeks flushing. Just plain old Jack is fine, sweetheart. A fancy title doesn't change who I am. The drive to Carter Enterprises felt different that morning. Instead of arriving before dawn to start his cleaning rounds, Jack pulled into the executive parking area, a spot with his name freshly painted on the concrete. His old pickup truck looked out of place among the sleek luxury vehicles, but he held his head high as he walked toward the building's main entrance. The security guard, Tom, who'd greeted him every morning for years, did a double take. Mr. Turner, sir, good morning, he called out with genuine warmth. It's still just Jack, Tom, he replied with a kind smile. How's Sarah doing with her college applications? Inside the lobby, employees who'd barely noticed him before now stopped to shake his hand. Their greetings were sincere, touched by a new respect that went beyond his position. Jack made his way to the elevator, his heart racing as the doors opened to the executive floor. His new office, a modest but well-appointed room with large windows, took his breath away. On the desk sat a framed photo of him receiving his Purple Heart, carefully restored from the worn original he'd carried in his wallet. Beside it was a handwritten note from Evelyn. Your courage inspires us all. Welcome home. The morning brought a steady stream of visitors, HR representatives helped him settle in, IT staff set up his computer, and various department heads stopped by to introduce themselves. Jack absorbed it all with quiet dignity, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. By afternoon, it was time for his first official duty, a mentorship meeting with a young veteran who'd recently joined the company's accounting department. The young man, barely older than Emily, sat nervously across from Jack's desk. "Tell me about your service," Jack said gently, recognizing the familiar look of someone carrying invisible weights. As the young veteran spoke about his struggles readjusting to civilian life, Jack listened with the patience of someone who'd walked the same path. He shared his own experiences, not just the triumphs, but the hard times too, including his PTSD struggles that had once seemed like shameful secrets. "The hardest part," Jack explained, "isn't what we faced over there. It's believing we deserve peace when we come home." The young man's eyes welled up, and Jack knew he'd found his true purpose in this new role. Throughout the week, Jack established a routine. Mornings were devoted to one-on-one mentoring sessions. Afternoons involved organizing veteran support programs and working with HR to develop better hiring practices for military personnel. He moved through the building with quiet confidence, his presence bringing a sense of stability to every floor. In the break room, he noticed a young employee looking overwhelmed by a stack of reports. Without hesitation, Jack sat down and helped her organize her thoughts, drawing on years of military precision to create a manageable action plan. Word spread quickly. Jack's door was always open, not just for veterans, but for anyone needing guidance. The following Tuesday brought his biggest challenge yet, leading his first company-wide workshop on resilience and teamwork. The conference room was packed, with some employees standing along the walls. Jack felt his hands trembling slightly as he arranged his materials at the podium. From her private observation room above the conference area, Evelyn watched through the one-way glass. She saw Jack take a deep breath, square his shoulders, and begin speaking. His voice, clear and steady, filled the room with stories of brotherhood, sacrifice, and the power of supporting one another. The employees leaned forward in their chairs, captivated, when Jack spoke about his darkest moments after the war, and how the simple act of someone believing in him had changed everything. Several people wiped away tears. He didn't just lecture, he engaged, asked questions, and encouraged dialogue about mental health and workplace support. Evelyn's heart swelled with pride as she watched him move confidently around the room, connecting with every person present. This was the same man who'd once believed he was just a janitor. Now he stood tall, his Purple Heart pinned to his lapel, helping others find their own strength. Jack's workshop wasn't about war stories or corporate policies. It was about humanity, about seeing the worth in every person, regardless of their position or past. As he wrapped up the session, the applause was thunderous. Employees lined up to shake his hand, share their own stories, or simply say thank you. From her vantage point, Evelyn could see the transformation in both Jack and her company. The walls between departments seemed to dissolve as people talked openly about their challenges and hopes. The corporate atmosphere she'd once found so stifling was becoming something warmer, more genuine. Jack gathered his materials, his face glowing with quiet satisfaction. He'd found his place, not at the bottom of the corporate ladder, not even at the top, but right in the heart of it, where he could make the most difference. As he looked up toward the observation room, somehow knowing Evelyn was there, he gave a small, grateful nod. Evelyn placed her hand against the glass, her own eyes misty with pride. This was more than a business decision or an act of charity. This was about recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary, about giving dignity its proper place in the corporate world. As she watched Jack confidently lead an impromptu discussion with a small group that had stayed behind, she knew that sometimes the greatest leadership comes from the most unexpected places. Jack sat quietly in his new office, still getting used to having 4 walls and a door with his name on it. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow across his desk. His fingers traced the edge of an old photo, himself in uniform decades younger, standing with his squad in Vietnam. He kept it hidden away for so many years, along with the memories that came with it. The knock on his door was gentle. "Come in," he called, knowing who it would be. Evelyn entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd made it their morning ritual now, though these days they met in his office instead of the company cafe. "How are you settling in?" she asked. setting his cup down. Still feels strange, Jack admitted, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. Like I'm living someone else's life sometimes. Evelyn noticed the photograph on his desk. May I? She asked, gesturing to it. Jack nodded, and she picked it up carefully. That was my unit, he explained softly. 3 months before. His voice trailed off, but the tremor in his hands told the rest of the story. The nightmares were the worst, he continued, surprising himself with his openness. For years after coming home, I'd wake up thinking I was still there. Emily's mother, Sarah. She'd hold me until I remembered where I was. He paused, taking a slow breath. The arrest happened during one of those episodes. I was at the grocery store, heard a car backfire, and suddenly I wasn't in Minnesota anymore. I was back in the jungle. Evelyn listened intently, her face soft with understanding. And now? How do you feel about it all now? Jack considered the question carefully. You know, for the longest time, I thought that part of my life was something to hide. But lately, he glanced at the Purple Heart displayed on his bookshelf. Lately, I'm starting to see it differently. Those struggles, they're part of who I am. They taught me about resilience, about getting back up no matter how many times life knocks you down. That's exactly why we need you here, Jack, Evelyn said earnestly. Your experience, even the difficult parts, especially the difficult parts, could help so many people. Jack raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? We're having a company-wide forum next week about mental health and workplace support, Evelyn explained. Would you consider sharing your story? Not just the military service, but the aftermath too? The real story? Jack's first instinct was to refuse. He'd spent decades building walls around those memories, but something had changed. The shame that once clouded those recollections had begun to lift, replaced by a gentle acceptance. You know, he said slowly, when I was at my lowest, what I needed most was to know I wasn't alone, that someone else understood. He looked at Evelyn with newfound resolve. If sharing my story could help even one person feel less alone, maybe it's worth it. Over the next few days, Jack prepared for the forum. He spent evenings at his kitchen table, Emily helping him organize his thoughts. She'd listen intently as he practiced, offering encouragement and honest feedback. Dad, she said one night, you're not just telling your story, you're showing people it's okay to be human, to struggle sometimes. The morning of the forum arrived crisp and clear. The company auditorium filled with employees from every department. Jack stood backstage, adjusting his tie nervously. Evelyn appeared beside him, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Just be yourself, she whispered. That's more than enough. As Jack stepped onto the stage, he saw familiar faces in the crowd. The accounting team he'd used to clean for, nodding encouragingly. The security guard he'd shared early morning conversations with, giving him a thumbs up. In the front row, Evelyn sat with an expression of quiet confidence in him. Good morning, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Most of you knew me as the janitor who kept your offices clean. Some of you know me now as the new Director of Veteran and Employee Support. But today, I want you to know me as just Jack, a man who's learned that our hardest battles often make us who we need to be. He shared everything. The horror of war, the struggle to readjust, the nights when peace seemed impossible to find. He spoke about the shame of his arrest, the fear of judgment, and the long journey toward healing. His voice grew stronger as he continued, drawing strength from the attentive faces before him. PTSD wasn't something we talked about back then, he explained. We were supposed to just tough it out, be strong. But real strength, I've learned, isn't about hiding our wounds. It's about having the courage to show them, to let them heal, and to help others heal too. As he finished speaking, the auditorium fell silent for a moment. Then, slowly, people began to rise. But this wasn't just applause. This was understanding, recognition, connection. Several employees were wiping tears from their eyes. Others nodded knowingly, as if pieces of their own stories had been reflected in his. A young IT specialist raised his hand during the Q&A session. Sir, he said, voice trembling slightly, I've been struggling with anxiety, but I've been afraid to tell anyone at work. Hearing your story, thank you. Just thank you. One by one, others began sharing their own struggles. With depression, grief, trauma, the auditorium had transformed into a space of authentic human connection. Jack stood there, overwhelmed by the impact of simple honesty. Evelyn watched from her seat, her heart full. This was more than just a company forum. It was the beginning of real change. In Jack's dignified vulnerability, she saw the future of Carter Enterprises taking shape, a workplace where strength meant being human first. As people filed out after the session, many stopped to shake Jack's hand or share a quiet word of gratitude. The shame that had haunted him for so long had transformed into something powerful, a bridge connecting him to others who needed to know they weren't alone. The kitchen table was covered with opened envelopes and letters, but one particular cream-colored envelope stood out from the rest. Emily's hands trembled as she read the words again, barely able to contain her excitement. "Dad!" she called out, her voice echoing through their small house. "Dad! Come quick!" Jack hurried in from the living room, still wearing his work clothes, a neat business casual outfit that had replaced his old janitor's uniform. "What is it, sweetheart? Everything okay?" Emily jumped up from her chair and threw her arms around him. "I got it. The scholarship. They're giving me a full ride." She pressed the letter into his hands, watching as his eyes scanned the page. Social work program. Full academic scholarship. Jack's voice grew thick with emotion as he read. "Emily, this is everything we've hoped for." Their modest kitchen, with its worn linoleum floor and dated cabinets, suddenly felt like the grandest place on earth. Jack pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, still holding the letter as if it might disappear. "It's because of you, Dad," Emily said softly, sitting beside him. "Watching you help people at work, seeing how you turned everything around, it made me realize what I want to do with my life." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Through the screen door, they could see Evelyn standing there, holding a folder of papers from work. She'd gotten into the habit of stopping by their house to review programs with Jack. "Come in!" Emily called out excitedly. "Evelyn, you won't believe it!" Evelyn entered, immediately noting their bright faces. "What's got you two so happy?" Emily rushed to show her the scholarship letter. Evelyn's eyes lit up as she read it, and she pulled Emily into a warm embrace.
"Oh, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you."
"When I wrote that recommendation letter, I knew you had a chance, but this is wonderful." Jack looked up sharply. "You wrote her a recommendation?" Evelyn smiled sheepishly. "Emily asked me not to tell you. She wanted to earn this on her own merit." "Which I did," Emily added quickly. "Evelyn just helped explain how watching you work with veterans and employees showed me what social work could really mean." Jack stood up slowly, emotion making it hard to speak. He looked at his daughter, seeing not just the excited teenager before him, but all the years of quiet strength she'd shown. Through their hardest times, she'd never complained about their simple life or his humble job. Now, watching her dream unfold, he felt a pride so deep, it ached. "I need to show you something," he said suddenly, heading to his bedroom. When he returned, he was holding a small wooden box, one Emily had seen but never opened. "Your military box," she whispered. Jack nodded, placing it on the table. "I've kept a lot of memories locked away in here, Emily. Some good, some painful. But there's one thing that's always reminded me that even the hardest battles are worth fighting." He opened the box and carefully lifted out his Purple Heart medal. Evelyn watched silently, understanding the weight of this moment. She'd seen how Jack had gradually opened up about his experiences, using them to help others at work. But this was different. This was passing on a legacy. "The day I got this," Jack said, holding the medal in his palm, "I thought it was the end of something. Turns out it was just the beginning. It taught me about courage, about getting back up when life knocks you down." He looked at Emily intently. "College won't be easy. There will be times when you doubt yourself or face challenges that seem too big. But you've got the same courage in you that this medal represents." Emily touched the medal gently, tracing its purple ribbon. "Dad, I can't take this. It's yours. You earned it. And now I want you to carry it with you," Jack insisted. "Not because you need it, but because I want you to remember that courage runs in your blood." Evelyn stepped forward, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Your father's right. I've watched you both this past year, the way you supported him, how you never lost faith. That's its own kind of courage." The next morning, as Emily prepared for her campus orientation, she stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her backpack. Jack appeared in her doorway, Purple Heart in hand. Without a word, he carefully pinned it to the strap of her backpack. "There," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Now you carry hope and courage with you, wherever you go." Emily touched the medal, then hugged her father tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart," Jack whispered, holding his daughter close, feeling the weight of the moment. Not an ending, but a new beginning for them both. Through her tears, Emily smiled at the Purple Heart now adorning her backpack. Its deep purple ribbon and metallic sheen caught the morning light, a reminder of battles fought and won, of quiet strength and enduring hope. As she prepared to step into her future, she carried with her not just a medal, but the legacy of courage it represented. The grand conference hall of Carter Enterprises buzzed with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the gathered employees, board members, and special guests. Banners bearing the company logo hung alongside American flags, and a new sign proudly displayed the Turner Initiative, honoring those who served. Jack Turner stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the third time. His hands weren't as steady as they'd been in combat, but for entirely different reasons now. He wore a crisp navy suit, a far cry from his old janitor's uniform, with his Purple Heart pinned proudly to his lapel. "Nervous?" Evelyn Carter appeared beside him, elegant in her charcoal business suit. Her eyes held the same warmth they'd shown that first day she'd found his wallet. "A little," Jack admitted with a slight chuckle. "Funny how facing a room full of people can be scarier than." He trailed off, but Evelyn understood. "You've got this," she assured him, touching his arm gently. "Just speak from your heart, like you always do." In the audience, Emily sat in the front row, wearing a new dress she'd bought for the occasion. Her college acceptance letter was safely tucked in her purse, a reminder of how far they'd come. Around her sat dozens of veterans who'd been invited to the launch, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and curiosity. Evelyn stepped up to the podium first, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Good morning, everyone. Today marks a new chapter in the history of Carter Enterprises." Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "6 months ago, I met a man who taught me more about dignity, courage, and perseverance than any business course ever could." Jack felt his chest tighten as she continued. "That man started as our janitor, but his impact reached far beyond clean floors and empty wastebaskets. He showed us what true leadership looks like, not through grand gestures or powerful positions, but through quiet strength and unwavering integrity." The audience listened intently as Evelyn outlined the initiative's goals: job training for veterans, mental health support, educational opportunities for their children, and a commitment to making Carter Enterprises a leader in veteran employment. "And now," Evelyn's voice softened with pride, "I'd like to introduce the man who inspired it all. Our Director of Veteran and Employee Support Initiatives, Mr. Jack Turner." The applause was thunderous. Jack approached the podium, his steps measured and purposeful. He glanced at Emily, who gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "You know, when I first walked through these doors as a janitor, I never imagined standing here today. I was just trying to provide for my daughter, doing honest work with whatever opportunities life gave me." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "But life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes it takes someone seeing something in you that you've forgotten about yourself." His eyes met Evelyn's briefly.
The Turner Initiative isn't just about me.
"It's about every veteran who's ever felt lost after serving, every family member who's sacrificed alongside them, and every person who believes in second chances." Jack gestured to the veterans in the audience. "To my fellow servicemen and women, this program is for you. We understand the challenges of coming home, of rebuilding a life, of carrying invisible wounds. You're not alone anymore." He shared his own story, the struggles with PTSD, the arrest that had almost cost him everything, and the redemption he'd found through the support of others. The room was silent, hanging on every word. "This initiative will provide job training, counseling, and support services. But more than that, it offers something I once thought I'd lost: hope. Hope for a better future, hope for our families, hope for healing." Emily wiped tears from her cheeks as her father continued speaking. She remembered the nights he'd worked late, the tight budgets, the proud way he'd carried himself, even when others looked down on him. Now he stood tall, respected, his dignity recognized at last. The Purple Heart I wear isn't just about the wounds I received in Vietnam, Jack said, touching the medal on his lapel. It's about the heart it takes to keep going, to believe in better days, to lift others up when you can. That's what this initiative is about, having the heart to help each other heal and grow. As he concluded his speech, the hall erupted in applause. Veterans in the audience stood first, followed by everyone else, until the entire room was on their feet. Jack caught sight of Emily clapping through her tears, her face beaming with pride. Evelyn returned to the podium, standing beside Jack. "The Turner Initiative begins today," she announced, "and we're already seeing results. 20 veterans have been hired across our departments, and partnerships with local veterans organizations are in place. This is just the beginning." She turned to Jack, her professional demeanor softening into a genuine smile. "Thank you, Jack, for showing us what real courage looks like." The applause swelled again. Jack and Evelyn shared a warm smile, both knowing how far they'd come from that first meeting over a lost wallet. In the audience, Emily watched her father, feeling the weight of all his sacrifices and the brightness of the future ahead. The Purple Heart on Jack's lapel caught the sunlight, gleaming like a promise kept, a life transformed, and a legacy secured. Around them, the hall filled with the sound of hope, in the applause, in the murmured conversations of veterans discussing new possibilities, in the proud sniffles of family members. Jack stood tall, finally at peace, knowing his years of quiet dignity had bloomed into something greater than himself. His sacrifice had been honored, his daughter's future secured, and his life transformed in ways he never could have imagined when he first pushed that janitor's cart through the lobby doors. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.